hello, everybody, and welcome to the Nimble Urban Survivor podcast with me, your host, Nick Cutelli. Hope you're having a good month, good day, good year, good something. We're going to get this show started. Take it away, drum people. Yeah! Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to the show. Nick Cutelli here, Nimble Urban Survivor. We got a good show for you today. Today's entry comes in from someone named Bentley. And I guess that's the car, right? The Bentley. I mean, they're very, very expensive cars. I don't know. That's a great name, just to name your kid. It's better than like Honda Accord or Chevy Malibu. You went for the high-priced car. I feel like if you're going to name your kid after a car, go for the Bentley or the Porsche. Maybe a Chevy. You know, if you're more of a you want an American-made type kid, go for the Chevy Spark, Malibu, whatever. But guys, Bentley sends in, Nick, I need your help. It's my boss. My boss constantly makes me hang out with them, like all the time, constantly. I can't get away. I don't have a personal life. My boss has completely taken it over and has made me their designated best friend, and there's nothing I can do because they're my boss, which is true. That's a horrible thing. So that's what we're going to talk about on today's show, is how to survive your lonely boss. I don't want to say how to survive like your boss trying to be your friend. No. Because the catalyst with all of this is your boss is lonely. That's why they've made you their friend. It's not because they like you or because they're like, oh, we'd be really good friends, blah, blah, blah. No, they're like, I'm going to make you my friend and make you hang out with me because I'm your boss. And there's nothing you can do about it. You guys know how it is because, you know, if your boss is like, hey, do you want to do something tonight? You can't just say no. Because then there's that thought in the back of your head of like, well, this guy might fire me, or I might not get a raise or a promotion because I don't want to hang out with the boss. And that actually happened to me when I worked in Chicago, the Federal Home Loan Bank of Chicago. I wanted to be promoted to an assistant vice president, even though, you know, I had a theater degree and probably had, you know, no right to even be there in the first place. I still wanted it. You know, because I'm like a Clubber Lang of the office, right? I want the win. And I never hung out with my boss outside of the office just because I don't do that. But the guy that I was competing with would. They would go to happy hours together and get drunk together. I think they had like a secret sexual relationship together. And he was the one who got promoted over me because he became friends with the boss and got drunk with the boss. And granted, at first, it seems like a great idea. Doesn't it seem like a great idea? You're like, oh, man, I'm going to go out with the boss. I'm going to get drunk. I'm going to be his friend. And then he's going to promote me and give me money and make me the president of the company one day. Isn't it amazing? But it's not like that. In reality, when you look at it, it will ruin your career. And let me tell you why. Because I know a lot of you people think like, oh, I'm going to be friendly with the boss and kiss his ass and hang out with him outside of work because it's going to benefit my career. It's not. It's not. Because think of it like this. If you become good friends with your boss and you're the only entertainment they have outside of the office, they're not going to let you get promoted. They're not going to let you move to a different department. They want you to stay right there working for them. The only time you're going to get promoted is when they get promoted and they bring you along with you, okay? That's the only scenario where you're going to get a promotion. Otherwise, they're just going to keep you right there because they don't want you to go nowhere because you're their source of entertainment. Now, I know you're also thinking about, like, well, I get a raise, and raises are good, I get more money. Yeah, but from an economic standpoint, and I've run the numbers because I know how to use Excel, granted, yes, they're going to give you a raise, but at the same time, they're going to make you start doing more economically rich things with them. I'll give you an example. So let's say you start hanging out with your boss and you're making like $40K a year, right? You know, entry-level job, whatever. And all you can afford is to have a couple of beers with your boss, right? And then your boss is like, well, these beers are great. I love this guy. But I'd like to go to like an NFL game with him or a Major League Baseball game with him. And this guy can't afford that. So I'll give him a raise. So now he can afford to go to richer things with me. So in hindsight, you're like, oh my God, I got a raise. I'm getting more money. But in reality, you're getting a raise so you can spend that money on more expensive things to do with your boss. And then one day you wake up and you're making like over $100,000 a year, but $50,000 of that is being spent on that, trip that you're going to Jamaica with your boss, all inclusive. So see kind of how, it kind of makes sense, right? So you're not really getting raises. You're not really going to get a new job or a promotion because they're going to keep you right there. So you're just kind of stuck there in a weird friend prison with your boss. And it's not healthy because then you have to like fake being a friend. And then what happens, right? We have all these people who have to like fake being a friend with their boss. And then they start becoming fake friends with their real friends. And then they lose friends. And then people are just losing friends left and right because their bosses are making them hang out with them. And then what happens? Is that they're lonely. And then they get depressed. And then what was it Yoda said? Yoda had that thing where it's like, no, I do not. There is no... I don't know what he said, but then like, you're really lonely and you're sad. And now we have a planet full of sad, lonely people who don't want to go to work and just get addicted to substances. And then we're looking at probably a couple of things. Well, number one, as always, an economic collapse. The stock market will collapse because people are just too depressed to go to work because they don't have any friends anymore except their bosses, and they just can't fake it anymore. And then we're just looking at a population decline. People aren't meeting each other. People aren't having kids. The economy is at a standstill. The population shrinks. Eventually, I give it like 5 to 10 years, we're going to be down to a population of just 10,000 people on the planet Earth. All because of these bosses who make their employees hang out with them. Okay? And here's the problem. It all stems from that little saying, because we've all done that. Like, we've all worked at a company, and they're like, we're a family here. So here's the thing. If you're getting a new job, and in the interview process, the boss is like, well, let me tell you something here about old Mechahan Steel. We're a family here. I'm like your grandpa. This guy over here is like your dad. And this guy's kind of like your uncle who just got out of jail for having some scandalous pictures of 17-year-olds on his computer. But here at the old steel mill, we're a family. If you hear that, and they're like, we're a family here at the company, get the fuck out. Get out of that interview. Even if the job pays $1 million a day, it's not worth it. Get out of there. Because whenever I hear that, that is the clear indicator that a company is just a dysfunctional, crazy office, is when they're like, we're a family here. Because really, in reality, like if you think about it, your regular family is probably a shit show of dysfunction. So now why do you want to work for a company that's kind of the same thing? Think about that. Why would you want to do that? And companies that say that, like it's just a nightmare. And I worked at a bank like that. I worked at the private bank, and the lady was like, we're kind of like a family here. And I'm just like, that's great, but I'm not coming to any family reunions. I'm just here to collect a paycheck and make it through the day. Pretty much that's all I want to do here is just collect money and go home. I could care less about you people outside of the office. But then when people, when the company says like, oh, we're a family, then everybody gets real personal with you, and it ruins your life. Also, your boss starts treating all of his employees like they're his best friends, which is so weird to me. And when I was a middle manager, I never did that. Like, I had a team of people. I managed, I think, 8 people. I treated them like coworkers. I never asked them to hang outside of the office. I never did happy hours with them. I didn't do any of that stuff. Because it's like, you have a personal life. Like, go live your personal life, right? So how do we survive the lonely boss? Because it starts out with drinks, and then the next thing you know, you have to take them to AA meetings, which is a true story. I had a buddy who worked at an office, and he was just enabling his boss. Like, his boss was just like an alcoholic. And then eventually his boss was like, oh my God, we have to stop going out to bars because I have a drinking problem, because he crashed his car one time and he got a DUI. And then my buddy found himself driving his boss to work every day, even though it was like a 10-mile, like out of the way, pick him up and then go to the office. It was a nightmare. And then the boss was like, hey, since you were friends with me and you were out drinking with me, you're kind of my enabler. So you need to start going to these AA meetings with me, even though you're not an alcoholic. I need someone to be there. And I remember my buddy was like, this is awful. I quit my job. I had to quit my job because I didn't want to become this guy's like best friend, lifeline, AA sponsor. He was my boss. And now we've turned into this weird, fucked up, like dramedy relationship. Well, the story doesn't end there. because he leaves the company, right? He doesn't give any like excuse because obviously you don't want to be an idiot and like tell your boss that he's a drunk and a loser and you don't want to be his friend because that will completely backfire. But at the same time, it did. Is because he went and he interviewed in another company and he found out that his boss was like trying to blacklist him. So he couldn't go work anywhere else. So he had to come back and work for him. And what do you think he did? 5 months go by. He's not getting any work because his boss blackmailed him. And now he's back at the same company, friends with his boss, taking him to AA and doing all that AA stuff with him. So that brings me up to a very important point, is you have to survive the lonely boss or else they can ruin your whole career. And now with the internet and all that, you can't really go anywhere because you're like, well, maybe I'll just move to a completely different city. No, they'll just Google your name, find out you work there, and they'll call your former boss because they do that now. So we need to find a way, and I think we have a way, that you can keep your relationship with your boss on a professional level instead of going to the friendship zone, because then it just completely, it ruins your career because you've just been monopolized as an employee until your boss like loses interest in you and moves on to somebody else or they fire you. Okay. And that's the rookie mistake. Let's talk about mistakes and then we're going to get into how to survive your lonely boss. Number one is don't be a dick. Don't be a dick. Okay. Because then people, they'll just fire you. You won't get raises or anything like that. Because I know that's what you think. You're like, well, I just won't be friendly with the boss and I'll be kind of mean to him and a dick. No, you don't want to do that because then you're really just going to ruin your career. You're going to get yourself blacklisted. So don't be like that. Don't be the mean guy, okay? So I would say step one is don't let anyone know about your personal life outside of the office. Don't do that. Don't make that mistake. Because, like your coworkers and your boss will try and ask you like, oh, what's your wife like? What's, what's your day like? What do you like to do outside of the office? They're all so fucking nosy, okay? Don't let anyone know what you do outside of the office. You need to have a very, what I like to call Clark Kent Superman type of life. And step one is that you want to set up the tone that you are a single parent living by yourself, just trying to make it day to day. So you don't really have a lot of time for anything because you're really invested in raising your kid. Because kids are the best escape out of any situation. Right? You know how many things that I love to avoid because I have a son? I'm like, I'm sorry, I can't make it. I got a kid, man. I can't go. Or, oh, man, I'd love to hang out with you guys and stay after, but I got to go get my son and I love him and I don't want to be a bad parent. Kids are the greatest excuse not to get involved with your lonely boss. So step one, again, is let all of your coworkers know, let your boss know, everyone, that you are a single parent struggling, but you love your kid, right? And you have to make all of this time for your kid, okay? So if you already have a kid, you pretty much just solved the problem. Just, focus on that. Because here's the problem is if you say that you're married and you have a wife, then your boss would be like, well, you want to go get drinks with me? And you're like, well, I can't. I got to go pick up my son. Dude, just have your wife pick your kid up. Oh. See what happens there? So you have to be a single parent raising your kid. And whoever you divorce, husband, wife, whatever, you need to say that they ran off to a foreign country. So there's no way they could ever pick your kid up so that you could go out and have drinks with your boss. So if they're like, well, what happened to your wife? Well, she moved, she lives in Brazil now. And she started a little small winery. And she left me here to raise my son. One of the greatest things I wish I could do is have drinks with you, Mr. Boss Guy. But sadly, I have to focus on my son and raise him. He needs a father in his life, even though my wife has left me. There you go. Perfect thing. Also, if if your boss knows that you have a wife and a kid already, like you really do, just let him know your wife left you. I think just set this up. You have to set this up. Now let's go to like sub-step 2. I'll call it sub-step 2. And that's in the scenario, if you don't have kids, obviously you should adopt a kid. There's a lot of kids out there that need a loving home. So maybe consider adopting a kid because also it's a win-win, really, in reality. Number one, you're adopting a kid. You're a parent to a kid whose parents obviously don't want to parent him. So that's great. You're loving them. You're taking care of them. You're raising them. And at the same time, the other win is you don't have to hang out with your lonely boss outside of the office. So it's a win-win, right? Hold on really quick. Can I tell them that? Can I tell people to adopt kids? Okay. I yes, I can't. Well, I legally can't tell you to adopt because, for all I know, you listening to the show, you might be a bad person. You might fail like the inspection, and they might not give you a kid, or you might not have the money to get a kid. What is it? How much is it to get a kid nowadays? Oh my god! Oh my! Are you serious? Okay, it's like $30,000 to adopt a kid. Okay, so maybe in that scenario, the adopting a kid thing gets a little expensive. So in that case, just get some pictures of a kid, like hire a child actor. Because let me tell you something, if I've learned anything about child actors, if you're cutting a check to those parents, they'll let you do anything with their kid. If you want to a couple of theater parents who are like big on pushing their kid into acting, they're like, hey, I'll give you $50 a week to pretend like your son is my son. I guarantee they'll do it. They're so desperate for that money. I'm pretty sure they will do it. So I guess that's kind of the cheaper route. Obviously, the good route is like adopt a kid, be a great parent, but that gets a little expensive. On the same side, too, you might not get a kid that looks like you, and then, your boss will be like, your kid looks nothing like you. And that's going to be really hard to cover up. So I'm not even going to get into that. But if you can adopt a kid that kind of looks like you, I guess that's kind of the best scenario. I'm not shallow like that. I would adopt any kid because, I'm Nick Cutelli, host of Nimble Urban Survivor. But you do what you got to do. On the second, thing here is you can obviously just hire a child actor, $50 a week, or they might just work for like a box of Cheez-Its. And you just pretend that that's your kid. And that's your excuse just not to hang out with your boss. Is that I have a kid. Here are some pictures of him. Here are some videos of me and my kid playing. Will you ever physically meet him? No. Well, why can I never meet your kid? He's allergic to stuff and he has really bad allergies and he goes to school a lot. He's very gifted. You just have to come up with a lot of excuses so your boss can never actually meet your kid in person, which is another thing too, is let your boss have like a fake address. Because, I've heard those stories too where bosses will just like pop into your house and show up. And you don't want that to happen. Like your boss like pops up, shows up at your house and then finds out like you don't have a kid. And then, now you really, really have to hang out with him. And he's going to do that thing where it's like, well, so you were just playing me for the whole time. Well, I'd fire you. But we got to make up for lost time. Saddle up, partner, because we're going to Applebee's. And you don't want that to happen. Okay. So when you're working, obviously, I guess that's kind of like step 3 is, don't let your boss know your home address. Give them a fake address. If they mail in your paycheck, give them a P.O. box address, which I don't think anybody even gets like mailed checks that much anymore. I think actors do. I still get mailed checks, but everything else I think is just like PayPal, Venmo, or digital currency, Dogcoin, Bitcoin, whatever. Okay. So let's recap really quick. I feel like we're all over the place. So step 1, don't let anybody know about your family life, right? Step 2, get a kid, adopt or rent one. And then step 3 is don't let anybody, especially your boss, know your real home address because they can do pop-ins. So those are the first 3 steps. Now let's move into another set because I know there's some people out there who are like, well, I don't want to do that because I don't want to adopt a kid or I don't want to have to go through the hassle of pretending like I'm a parent because it's a lot of work. It is a lot of work, right? You have to print out certificates and say that you're world's best dad, which funny story, I actually did that when I worked at the Federal Home Loan Bank of Chicago. I didn't let a lot of people at first know a lot about me. And I remember to win people over because I found that in the office that people really will give a lot more leeway to people who have kids. Okay, it's kind of like back, remember in the 70s and the 80s and kind of the beginning of the 90s when, smokers were allowed to go out and have a smoke break every 45 minutes or something in the office. I don't think you can do that anymore. So that kind of went away with the dodo bird. But now people who have parents or have kids, they can leave whenever they want. So they can just be like, oh, man, I got to go pick up my kid from school early today. So can I leave? Or, and they're like, yeah, sure. So I remember when I worked at the office, I went online and I found a certificate. Because if you didn't know this, you can find fake certificates of anything on the internet. So I went on and I printed out a certificate that said world's greatest dad. And I put my name. I also remember I got from my friend's kid, they had colored me a picture. And so I took that. And so when I went into the office in the morning, I put both of those up in my cubicle. And when people walked by, they assumed that I had a kid because I'm world's best dad. They see the, kid art, which is, all scribbled outside of the lines, which is, kid art. It's very Pablo Picasso meets Renier or whatever. And then they give you a lot of leeway. So in reality, it's another win-win-win-win-win, right? Because now you can even use your fake kid as an excuse to show up late, leave early, take longer lunches. Because I used to have people who do that. Like they'd come in late and I'd be like, well, why are you late? And like, oh man, we just had real difficulty, getting our kid ready for school. And that's why I'm 3 hours late. And in reality, you want to kind of chew them out and be a dick, but you can't because you're like, well, they have a kid. They're raising the future generations of America. So I can't really be a dick. So I'm going to give you some leeway on that one. And you can show up 3 hours late. You can even leave early because you got to pick up your kid. Or you can leave in the middle of the day because your kid got in trouble at school or they got to go to the dentist or the doctor or the proctologist or whatever. Kids are a great excuse. So I guess we really expanded on something bigger here on the Nimble Urban Survivor is that, yes, having your fake kid will help you get out of hanging out with your boss. But at the same time, it gives you a lot of leeway in the real world, especially the office, because people will kind of let you come and go as you please because you're raising a kid, which is a very difficult thing. I have a lot of respect for all of the parents out there. In reality, and I know I'm going off on a tangent here. I know my producer's looking at me like you need to stick to the show. But on a real side note, let me have the side note. Being a parent is tough. It's a tough job. And I honestly believe that there should be a bill in the government that says that people who have kids can just kind of come and go as they please in the American workplace. Right? Shouldn't that be a thing? I don't know. Well, no, maybe if I think of it, that might ruin the economy. But it's kind of a nice idea, right? Right? Okay. So that's kind of the first 3 steps. When it comes to, I think the most effective way, we do have some other methods, but I think those 3 steps there with the fake kid and all that, I think that's the best method technically. But if you don't feel comfortable doing that, we have some other solutions for you. So let's talk about that. So solution number 2 is have really bad allergies or have a medical condition where you can't be out in public, right? Right now, COVID works because, you can't really be out in public. You have to wear a mask. You don't feel comfortable. But eventually, COVID is going to be gone. So you kind of want to capitalize that same kind of thing, too. Is you have a rare medical condition that only 1 out of every 1 trillion people on Earth gets, and you can't, be around bars or alcohol or something like that because, it has a weird, I don't know, you can find these medical, just Google it. You can come up with a good medical excuse and you have bad allergies and you can't go out. But you're really going to have to play that up at the office, though. If you have really, really bad allergies and you can't be outside and you literally tell your boss you have to live in a bubble in your apartment, you're going to have to find a way to make yourself sneeze or choke or do all these things in the office so they can really see you suffering. So I would go with allergy/illness because you can act like you have a cold or the flu and make up excuse after excuse after excuse, but eventually your excuses run out and your boss knows that you're full of shit. So I guess solution number 2 is, act like you have a bubble boy disease. I think that's a really, really good one. Solution number 3, we've talked about this in the show millions of times. Go out there, hire an actor to come in as a temp and be the boss's best friend. Literally pay someone to be their friend. It's kind of like a storyline in a really bad rom-com on the Lifetime Network, but it makes sense, doesn't it? I don't want to be bothered by my lonely boss and hang out with him all the time. I'm just going to hire somebody else. I think there was a movie like that. It was a woman was going to a wedding, and so she hired a gigolo to pretend to be her husband or her boyfriend or whatever at this wedding. And it works. If I've learned anything from rom-coms, guys, what they do in the rom-com has a 10% chance of actually working in real life. So go out there and hire a temp to be their best friend, okay? Now, here's another thing. If you don't have the money to get a temp, or obviously I don't think a company's just going to hire someone because you said, then what you need to do is try and pawn your boss off on another employee. Okay, when you're in meetings with your boss and you find out what they like, if they like Star Wars or Star Trek or, 50 Shades of Grey, capitalize off that. Be like, oh man, yeah, you like 50 Shades of Grey, dude. Do you know that like my coworker, I mean, the guy who works for you, K-Bone, he also loves 50 Shades. Like, you guys should hang out sometimes and try and get those guys to hang out. And you never know, they could hit it off and become friends. And it might work out. And granted, it might backfire because that person might get promoted and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, it comes with, obviously there's an anchor attached to that. So that's kind of solution number 3 is that you kind of just want to pawn off somebody else. And I think the best route is to hire like an actor or somebody to be his friend, not be his lover, be his friend. Because let's talk about that really quick here. Because I know you're thinking, like, we've all seen those rom-coms, right? Where the employee's like, my boss is such a dick. How do I get my boss to be happy and nice to me? I'll go hire someone for them to meet. But then that never works out. Those relationships never work out. Because if your boss is really a nice person, they wouldn't be using you to be their friend. Or they'd have a lover or girlfriend or wife, right? They'd have a real life. But obviously there's something wrong with them because they don't. So it doesn't work because, yeah, they'll date this person for a while and you're paying this prostitute or gigolo to date your boss and it's going great because they're focused solely on them. But then, like, what happens when they break up or you run out of money and you can't pay them anymore? Your boss gets like super mad and depressed. And then worst case scenario, what if they find out that it was you paying this person? Now you're like really fucked. And then who do you think they're going to turn to when they're like, I'm really sad and depressed because my girlfriend, who I didn't know you were paying to hang out with me, crushed my heart. They're going to turn to you. And now you've just gone from being their drinking buddy friend after work to now you have to like salvage their whole relationship. And you might have to talk them off a bridge, which is a real story. So we had a story submitted to the show because I always ask for like stories for the show. And somebody said that. They said, I had a boss and she was really needy. She always made me hang out with her, not just outside of work, but on the weekends. And that's bad. So I met this guy and I introduced him to my boss and they dated for like 3 months. And she says it was like the best 3 months of her life because her boss didn't bother with her. Her boss was focused on this relationship that she had introduced her to. Now, she didn't pay this guy. It wasn't a gigolo. She just met this guy and was like, you should meet my boss. And she played matchmaker. And it worked. For a little bit, it worked because, obviously they're in the honeymoon phase. Her boss, they're going out. They're doing all these great things. But then they broke up. And she said that was even worse is when a boss has been dumped, comes into the office and she was pissed and she was treating all the employees like crap. But then on top of that, my friend says one night she was sleeping. She gets a phone call, 2 a.m. It's her boss. Her boss says that she's going to go over to a bridge and jump off the bridge because this guy who she only dated for like maybe a hot second, 3 months, broke her heart. Okay. And that she needs some real support. So my friend was like, what can I do? I know it's like 2 a.m, but I got out of bed. I got dressed up. I drove over to her house and I spent the whole night with her, like talking her off the ledge. So that's, I guess, a good tip is don't tug on your boss's heart. Okay? Don't do that. Don't do that at all because that's not good. Okay, so moving on, let's talk about the fourth and final solution here. And that is you are going to want to, what I call, flip the table. Okay? You want to go all in and you want to make it that your boss never wants to hang out with you ever again. Okay? And you've got to think of it that you need to go into the mentality of like a fraternity guy who just went active in the fraternity. And this is like the big night celebration, okay? So it's almost like your boss wants to go out for drinks with you, then you want to make that the most intense, over-the-top night of their life. Now, I'm not saying make it like a bad night and it's like bad and you make them feel bad or you do harm to them. I mean that you just take them on a crazy party journey so that they know that, oh man, dude, like I would go out for drinks with Nick, but he'll go all night. He's crazy. Is it fun? Yeah, but like I can't keep up with them. So that's what you need to do. is you need to flip the tables on your boss. And you need to make it where they don't want to hang out with you because you're too fun or you drink and party too much. You're too intense, okay? And I'm not going to lie, guys, you're going to have to do this. Okay, so first thing you want to do in the fourth and final solution here on the Nimble Urban Survivor on how to survive your lonely boss is you need to look up what your boss does. Like, are they an intense partier? Do they like to go for like cocktails? Maybe they like to go to a nice jazz club and just sip on a little Shirley Temple and be like, boom, 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 beep, beep, beep. You know, the whole jazz music thing, which I love to scat, by the way. But I'm white, so I probably would never be accepted into the jazz community. But that's what you got to do. So in step 1 of solution 4 is find out what level of partier that your boss is at. Are they more of a PG partier where they just have like a glass of wine? Are they more of like a beer drinker, like they have a few drinks, a six-packs, they get a little bit buzzed, and they tell everybody in the bar that, you know, they're best friends over sharing some jalapeno poppers? Or are they an intense drinker? Now, chances are they're probably not going to be an intense, over-the-top drinker because they are the boss, so they must have some sort of discipline to get to the job where they are. But if you have a boss who like runs a tech startup, they're probably pretty intense. But at the same time, like I always find like the young tech startup people usually have like a really crazy life outside of work, so they never really party with their coworkers. So it kind of works out. So that's step 1 is you want to find out what kind of partier they are. And then you want to add on like an extra percent of that. So if you find out that they're like a level 2 partier, then you want to put them through like a level 50 party scenario, right? So like if they're a person who just like I go home and I have some wine, or I go to a wine bar and we talk it out, you want to take them to like an underground speakeasy casino where they could possibly get arrested and you're throwing back shots and something gets lit on fire and you might get kidnapped by the mafia. That's the kind of partying you want to put your boss through so that they know never to party with you again because you're just too awesome and too intense. You're not mean. Again, let me reiterate, you're not a mean, bad person. You're just too much of a partier. And we've all had those friends, right? You're just like, dude, like I cannot hang with this guy because he goes hard. He goes hard, okay? And that's the thing. In step 2 is that, you know, your boss is like, do you want to get drinks? You will say, yeah. And then here's what you say to them. Because actually in step 2, it might end all of it. Because in step 2, you kind of want to hint to your boss that you're kind of an intense party person, right? So if they're like, hey, Nick, what are you doing after work on Friday? You want to get a drink? There's what you say. You go, dude, I don't want to just get a drink. I want to go hard. I'm going to go like fucking Doc Brown rolls up in a time machine and takes me back to the year 1945 hard, because drinks back then were like a penny and I've got $1, so that means I could technically get 100 drinks. That's how fucking hard I go. I go back to the future 1, 2, and 3, and Back to the Future 4, which I wrote the script my fucking self, called Marty Goes Back in Time to Party Cheap and Drink Hard. That's how hard I go. That's how fucking hard I go. I go economically cheap drinks hard. Boom. And when you say that, your boss is going to do 2 things. Either one, they're going to be like, okay, well, let me check my schedule and then I'll confirm with you. And you've scared them away, right? They'll be like, I don't want to hang out with you. He's crazy. Or they're going to be interested. You know, that's the other thing. You have to be ready for that. They're going to be like, that's kind of an interesting thing. Well, I'd like to go back to the future. Cheap economy, drunk, 1945, 100 beer, penny hard. That's that kind of, you know, well, that sounds fun. You know, your boss will always be like, oh, well, that sounds fun. And that's what you're going to have to do, is you're going to have to prepare yourself for that night of going back to the future hard, okay? And I would say the perfect formula to that, and I'm getting a shake from my lawyer. So legally, let me just say this. I'll say it. So legally, let me say this. Number 1, don't drink and drive. Number 2, drink plenty of water. Okay? Because the goal here is you're not going to get your boss like drunk and hungover to where they're just like, I don't want to party with you because you're just too hungover. You want to just make it to where, yes, you're having some drinks, okay? But your nights just get too intense. Like you start out in downtown Chicago having a drink at a wine bar, and you end up in Vegas playing Russian roulette with a group of like South Koreans. Like, that's how intense you want to go. So it's not about let me get my boss like super, super drunk and super, super hungover. It's about let me take them on the weirdest, wildest, wacky journey that they'll ever think of. It's kind of like, I guess if I had to use an analogy for this, like, remember the movie The Hangover? Like, we don't get to see what they did on that crazy night, and they kind of put together bits and pieces of it, but then remember at the end they show like the pictures of what they were doing. That's kind of like what you want to do, is you're going to kind of reenact that level of craziness with, you know, your boss. But obviously you don't want to drug them or get them too drunk, because then it backfires, right? Then they don't remember the night, and you have to redo it all over again. So step 2, obviously, to reiterate, is that set the tone that like you go pretty hard, okay? Step 3 is you're going to have to do it. You're going to have to do it. And in this case, I would say, you know, obviously don't get drunk. If you can drink non-alcoholic beers the whole night or just club soda and lime, do it. You want to have complete control, because the worst case scenario is that you get drunk and you lose complete control. Obviously, you know, your boss might not be a big drinker. Or if they are a big drinker, then hell, this is easy. But then at the same time, like I just said, don't let them get shit-faced drunk, because then they're going to forget about everything you did. And you're going to have to repeat this whole process over again. Okay? So you want to take them on a wild adventure. And I don't know what that adventure entails, but the way I would say to set up the perfect formula to this is start out at like a bar or a club that you know. Okay, so get like a whiteboard and be like, we're going to start here, A, at Ice and Fuel Bar and Grill, right? And then draw a big old long line. And then at the other end, put, you know, Z, we're going to end up in Tijuana, you know, running drugs for the cartel. How do we get from A to Z? How do we go from a couple of drinks in Cleveland to we're in Tijuana and we're about to make a shit ton of money, you know, shoving cocaine up our butt and going across the border? All right. Now, granted, you might not make it to Z. That might be a little tough. But you want to try at least make it to letter G. And I can't really give you the information because I'm told from a legal standpoint, I can't really tell you what to do, or else you could sue the show. And I don't want you to do that. But, you know, have a few drinks here. You know, go to a weird swingers party. You know, that's kind of socially awkward. Take them to an underground casino that the mob runs and lose a lot of money. And then be like, dude, we're going to have to stay here and like, you know, work off the money. Like, we owe the mob money. They're going to make us like wash dishes or make, you know, chicken fettuccine or whatever. Okay. Get them into weird, crazy situations that have a touch of violence. A touch of violence, not a lot of violence. It's kind of like when you order a vodka tonic and you're like, I want a touch of lime. That's the kind of violence you want, is a touch, a dabble, a hint of violence. And then after that, I feel like easily then the next step, step 4, is that your boss will never want to hang out with you. But you have to test it. So you have to test it to make sure that that's correct. How do you do that? Well, you wait a couple of days and you go in there and you ask your boss if he wants to hang out with you again. And if they say no, or if they say that they're busy, then you know that you've won. And I think that's the best solution out of all of this, is solution 4. You know, we talked about having the kid and all that, but I think solution 4 is the best solution here, is you just want to flip the switch, turn the tables. And I think that, you know, obviously should work. But we do have a solution 5. Okay, and solution 5 is that if your boss is lonely, okay, and you think that they're going to want to hang out with you, sign them up for an improv class. Okay, find out if there's improv in your community, at the local theater or whatever, and sign them up for an improv class. Because true story, when I started out like years and years ago studying improv and comedy at the Second City, Chicago, okay, you would have to start at the bottom, obviously. You have to start at level 1. And what would happen is that at level 1 is you would get some people in the class who were like office people. They were like corporate office people who signed up for an improv class because they needed to work on, I guess, their like intercommunication skills or being comfortable like talking with people or things like that. But I think sometimes they would take an improv class because they were lonely and they wanted friends. Because I remember after improv class, like people would go and get a drink together at a bar. I normally really didn't do it because like I had a job and I'd have to go home and sleep. But that's solution 5 is that if your boss, get him some friends, sign him up for an improv class. Be like, hey boss, I signed you up for this improv 101 class. I think you're going to have a lot of fun, because a lot of corporate people would take improv just to meet other people and have friends. I kid you not. I'm dead serious right now. So if you are like, this works like if you're just like a lonely person in general and you want to make some friends, sign up for like an acting 101 class or an improv class. Meet people, because they'll hang out after class together, So that's solution 5. Real quick solution, not too detailed, is sign your boss up for an improv comedy class, and boom, you just put them in a class. It's after work, so you know that their after work schedule is always completely full. And now he's got his own group outside of the office to hang out with. Worst case scenario here is that your boss ends up becoming really, really good at improv comedy and then gets a job working for Saturday Night Live or something, and then you get promoted to head of the company. So it's kind of a win-win there, right? Like your boss gets famous, comically famous, you get promoted, he's got friends, everybody wins, okay? So that's a good thing. Like solution 5, I think, is probably our most uplifting, positive solution. The everybody wins solution is signing them up for an improv comedy class. Quick story, funny story. Guy has a boss. This is a real story, by the way. And he said his boss was just a real drinker. His boss loved to drink. And I mean, his boss would throw back, like tons and tons of like gin and tonics, vodkas. I mean, he would just get shit-faced. But it was okay because his boss had like a driver. So he didn't have to worry about drinking and driving. It was easy at first because he would go out with his boss drinking like 1 or 2 nights a week. He would get drunk and he would just take an Uber back home. Granted, it cost some money, but he was like, well, it worked. Okay, I was Ubering home. But then his boss was just like a borderline alcoholic. Like he wanted to go out to drink every night of the week, and that gets costly, right? Because for the boss, it doesn't cost anything because they got a lot of money and they got a driver and they don't have to worry about DUIs and things like this or drunk driving, which you should never drink and drive. But my friend was like, man, Nick, I'm spending so much money on Ubers and Lyfts. I'm dropping hundreds of dollars a week, let alone, too, I'm dropping money on these drinks because my boss is not buying all of these drinks. I'm spending so much money. So what my friend would have to do is he was already in, like he couldn't, say that he can't have drinks with him. He was still having drinks with his boss, but what he would have to do is afterwards, he would go across the street to a movie theater and watch a movie and sober up. And he would take like an hour or two to like sober up and eat food and drink water and watch a movie so that he wouldn't have to spend the money on an Uber to go home and he could drive his car home. And I was like, that's terrible. That's terrible. Because eventually, like you run out of like good movies to watch. Also, movie stuff, popcorn and stuff, it's kind of expensive, but I guess it's still cheaper than getting Ubers during prime time when they jack the price up by 100%. But that's terrible. So the moral of the story is that if you're a boss, don't make your employees be your friends. Go out there and just find some. Or buy some or rent some or whatever. I mean, people can literally, get a mail order bride. Like lonely men can literally buy a woman from a foreign country. So if we can do that, you might be able to buy friends too. So something to think about. So guys, that's our time today. Thank you, as always, for tuning in to the Nimble Urban Survivor, hosted by me, Nick Cutelli. Hope you enjoyed our episode. I thought it was very informative. Very informative today. So, guys, as always, if you ever have a topic you want me to talk about on the show, or if you'd like to be a guest on our show, feel free to reach out to me at my website at www.cutellicomedy.com. Remember, guys, have a good month, good day, good year, good week, good something. Remember, if your boss is becoming a little too friendly, well, you might want to talk to, HR. Maybe it's getting a little sexual harassy. But if they're trying to make you their friend, listen to this episode, save your life, save your career. You're welcome for that, by the way. And guys, remember, survive out there.